Carla sat by the window of the afternoon bus, her eyes trailing the endless lines of old pines blurring past the dusty glass. Each turn of the wheels echoed the questions that had haunted her all week. Why am I going? Why am I still hoping? The gold-foiled invitation, stamped with the Greenwood family crest, had arrived 3 weeks ago. A distant cousin Amanda had included a curt note. We're holding the annual Greenwood family reunion at the estate. You should come if you still care. No, we'd love to see you. No, hope you're well. No apology for the years of silence and estrangement. Carla, 27, lived alone in Portland, working as an accountant at a small construction firm. Her mother Rachel Greenwood had died of cancer 8 years ago. As for her father, she had never known him. After her mother's death, the paternal side of the family all but cut her off. No holiday calls, no Thanksgiving invites. She had become the forgotten name in a once proud family tree. The bus stopped at a dusty country fork. Carla stepped off with her small suitcase, glancing around. Before her stood the Greenwood Estate Gatesa place that had once been her childhood heaven, and the last place she and her mother had walked away from after a bitter argument with her grandmother. You don't belong here, Rachel. And neither does that child. That sentence was burned into Carla's memory, even though she had only been 10. The wooden gates opened to a lively scene. Flags, balloons, long tables draped in red and white checkered cloth, the smell of barbecue drifting through the air. Children ran on the lawn, adults clinked beer bottles, and country music blared from the speakers in the corner of the yard. Carla stepped in, her heart tightening as she saw everyone from her gray-haired uncle to cousins who had never spoken to her wearing matching red t-shirts printed with the Greenwood family tree and the slogan, "One blood, one legacy." She was the only one in a plain white blouse. She smirked. Amanda approached, cocktail in hand, giving Carla a once-over that felt more like a scan than a greeting. "Oh, you actually came? We weren't sure you would."
Carla stayed polite.
"You invited me. I came." Amanda shrugged. "I only sent it because the list required it. Anyway, I think it's best if we don't bring up anything about your mother." Carla's grip on her bag tightened. "I didn't come here to stir trouble." "Good. Oh, and reunion shirts are only for official family members. Hope that's not a problem."
Carla smiled coldly.
"Not at all. I had no intention of wearing one." Amanda turned away just as the crowd behind them burst into laughter at someone joking about how Aunt Rachel once dated some wandering guitarist, and it was clear everyone knew Carla could hear them. Carla stepped away, veering off the main path toward the back acres where a small, weathered cabin stood abandoned. She remembered the summers her mother brought her here, picking wild berries, baking pies in the old wood stove, and singing together on the porch as the wind howled through the fields. This had been her mother's haven before she was cast out, and it remained the only place on the entire estate where Carla ever felt she belonged. She rested her hand on the aging wood and exhaled. "Mom, I came back. Just to feel if I still exist in this soil." At that moment, from the estate's front gates, the deep hum of an engine sounded. Not a food truck, not a relative's familiar car. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop, and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, looking every bit the professional. Neat, composed, and holding a thick file folder. Heads turned. The children stopped running. The music was lowered. The man raised his voice just enough to be clear. "Excuse me, is Miss Carla Greenwood here?" Carla turned, startled.
"I am Carla."
He smiled and approached quickly, extending the folder with practiced grace. "James Allen, representing Blackstone and Marsh Law Offices. I'm here on behalf of the last will and testament of your grandfather, Mr. Harold Greenwood." Silence fell like a curtain. James continued. "Mr. Harold has transferred full ownership of this land, including the estate and the cabin behind it, the one grandchild he believed truly understood the value of this place. That person is you, Carla Greenwood." The crowd froze. Amanda dropped her cocktail. An uncle choked on air. Carla said nothing. She opened the folder, seeing pages of notarized documents, stamped in red. She was now the legal owner of the land beneath this reunion. She lifted her head, her voice gentle but resolute. "Well then, please everyone enjoy the party. On my land." The atmosphere of the family gathering froze within seconds of the suited man's announcement. Just minutes earlier, Carla had been the outsider denied a reunion shirt, never called by name, and clearly unwelcome to stay for long. And now, all those who once turned their backs on her stood still, their eyes fixed on the woman in the plain white blouse, the one they had never considered real family. Aunt Esther, the loudest voice in the clan, stepped forward, her tone strained. "Sweetheart, there must be some mistake. Harold never mentioned anything like this." James, the attorney, calmly flipped through his folder. "I have the original notarized will. It clearly states, the entire Greenwood estate, including this very property where the gathering is being held, is transferred in full to Ms. Carla Greenwood, Mr. Harold's granddaughter." The crowd exchanged looks. Murmurs rippled through the group. Amanda looked down, lips pressed tight. Uncle Richard raised his eyebrows, as if choking down a mouthful of fury. Carla stood at the eye of the storm, strangely hollow inside. There was no satisfaction, no surge of anger. Just a quiet sadness, the kind that comes when you're finally acknowledged, only to realize it doesn't matter the way it once did. She walked slowly toward the long table stacked with red family reunion shirts. One had fallen to the ground, perhaps dropped in shock. Carla bent down, picked it up, and stared at the bold words on the chest. "One blood. One legacy." She shook her head softly and gently placed the shirt back on the table. She may now own the land, but she didn't need a shirt to prove she belonged. James gave her a courteous farewell before heading to his car. Just before getting in, he leaned in and whispered, "Your grandfather left a handwritten letter. It's in the back pocket of the file." Carla nodded and thanked him. Holding the folder tight, she turned her back on the crowd and walked toward the small wooden cabin, the one long abandoned, the only place she'd felt at home as a child. Behind her, voices rose. She must have tricked the old man when his mind was going. There's no way Harold left that to her. Something shady's going on for sure. She didn't turn around. Not a single word in response. Because Carla knew truth didn't require debate. The cabin was the same, weathered, overgrown, draped in moss. Yet to Carla, it felt like an old quilt that still held her mother's scent, soft, warm, and full of memory. She stepped inside and opened a window, letting in the golden dusk. Beneath a layer of dust, almost everything remained. A crooked painting, a stopped pendulum clock, and a sagging bookshelf with yellowed, crumbling spines. Carla sat on the wooden floor and opened the folder. Near the back, she found a brown envelope. On the front, written in slightly shaky but deliberate handwriting, were the words, "For Carla, the one who still listens to this land." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Dearest Carla, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. I wasn't the best father to your mother. I was harsh, stubborn, afraid of difference, and in that fear, I lost my only daughter. But I watched you from afar. I saw you grow strong and kind in a world that isn't always kind. And I knew you understood the true value of what this family calls inheritance. Because to you, this land was not just property. It was memory. It was love. You're the only one who ever returned to that little house. The only one who laid a hand on its walls without trying to tear them down. Hold on to this land. Do with it what you will. I ask only one thing. Don't let it become something others want to sell away. If you choose forgiveness, I'll be grateful. If nobody will still understand. With all the love I never had the courage to show. Your grandfather, Harold Greenwood." Carla folded the letter, silent tears falling onto the paper. She didn't cry for recognition. She cried because someone in her family had finally seen her not as a forgotten name in a family tree, but as a person. Twilight settled in. From the cabin window, she watched the relatives disperse. No one came looking for her. No one knocked on the cabin door. They had come for the party. She had come for something deeper, memory. She sighed and rose to her feet, giving the room one last look. This land will be different, she thought. It starts right here. In the place they all wanted to leave behind. Carla woke up the next morning on the old sofa covered with a worn blanket in the wooden cabin. Light filtered through the dusty windowpane, casting soft shadows across the time-worn floor. No car horns, no phone buzzes, just the whisper of wind rustling through the distant forest, and the steady tap of a woodpecker on the old tree outside. She sat up, tied her hair back, and stepped out onto the porch. The grass behind the cabin glistened with dew, the earthy scent of damp soil mingling with the soft aroma of pine. Before her stretched the vast piece of land, once a place of exile, now a legacy her grandfather had left to her alone. Carla knew the story of the cabin well. It had once been the secondary house on the Greenwood property, built by Harold himself in his younger days. As a child, her mother Rachel had lived there with him for a time, until she dared to love someone the family refused to accept. She had been cast out and the cabin sealed off. They called it the cursed house not because it was haunted, but because it stood as a reminder of things the family didn't want to remember: betrayal, unforgiveness, and a daughter banished from the bloodline. Carla stepped off the porch, her shoes soaked with morning dew. She walked along the broken wooden fence, trailing her fingers along the splintered rails as if seeking permission from the very place that once refused her. In her mind, old memories surfaced. "Mom, why don't we sleep in the big house like the others?" "Because this is the place Grandpa built with his own hands. It's the real heart of this land, sweetheart." Then, "Why doesn't anyone live here anymore?" "Because they forgot how to cherish things that aren't perfect." After a simple breakfast of cold bread and instant coffee from an old thermos, Carla decided to clean the cabin. Not because she planned to stay forever, she didn't yet know what she would do. But cleaning was the first way to say, "I belong here." She opened cupboards, swept cobwebs, wiped down dusty shelves. In the corner of the fireplace, she discovered a small wooden box, the kind her mother used to store handwritten letters. Inside, alongside a few faded photos, was a letter never sent. The paper had yellowed, and the handwriting was soft and trembling. "Father, I know you don't want to see me, but I'm writing anyway. I don't regret loving even if it was the wrong person. I only regret that you couldn't see Carla grow up. She has your eyes, my stubbornness, and a heart bigger than either of us. If someday you realize I didn't betray you, I just tried to be honest with myself. Please keep the cabin for Carla. It's the only place I ever felt like your daughter. Rachel." Carla folded the letter, her chest tightening. Her mother had once tried to return, once hoped for forgiveness, but the apology never made it. Just like the childhood Carla lived full of things left unsaid. She sank to the floor, her back against the cold wood. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. This cabin was the heart the family had forgotten. That afternoon, as Carla swept leaves from the yard, a pickup truck rolled to a stop at the old path's edge. A woman in her 50s stepped out, wearing a straw hat and a sun-browned face. "You must be Carla?" she asked, her southern accent unmistakable. "Yes.
I'm Carla Greenwood."
The woman smiled. "I'm Darlene, used to work here at the ranch. Helped your mama when you were just a little thing. When I heard Mr. Harold left the land to you, I couldn't believe it. But seeing you stand here, I know it's right." Carla was moved. "You knew my mom?" "Sure did. Rachel used to cook with me every afternoon. She liked to sing while washing dishes. Always sneaked sweets to the staff, even when Harold forbade it." They sat together on the porch steps, sipping tea under a blazing sunset. Darlene shared stories no one else had ever told. That Rachel once tried to buy the cabin back. That Harold used to watch Carla from afar whenever she visited, too afraid to step out. That one winter, he left a bag of groceries on the doorstep but ran off before anyone saw, afraid it would look like he'd softened. Carla listened, each story like a puzzle piece completing an old, missing picture. "Your grandfather didn't choose you for status," Darlene said. "He chose you because you were the only one who didn't turn your back on the past." That night, Carla lit a small candle and placed it on the windowsill, its warm glow spilling outward like a silent declaration. "I'm not leaving. I'm not letting go. And I'm not like the ones who gave this place up." The next morning, Carla brewed a pot of hot coffee and set it on the windowsill of the cabin. The wind was still, dew clung to the blades of grass, and the early sunlight poured through the treetops like golden ribbons slicing the air. This land, once a place of sorrowful memories for a forgotten child, now felt familiar, like the embrace she had longed for her entire life. Carla put on the same white shirt she had worn to the family gathering. It was wrinkled now, but she didn't care. In her breast pocket were two things: her mother's letter, and her grandfather's will, two fragments of truth that had brought buried history into the light. Around 9 a.m., the hum of an engine broke the morning silence. A sleek black sedan rolled down the sandy path and stopped in front of the cabin. The door opened, and the same well-dressed man from before James Allen stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase and a thin envelope. "Miss Greenwood," he nodded politely. "I hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," Carla replied, gesturing to the wooden chair on the porch. "Coffee?" "Gladly," James smiled, accepting the cup she poured from the pot. "I've reviewed countless wills in my legal career, but few have moved me the way your grandfather's did." Carla studied him. "My grandfather was so strict, no one ever believed he could change." James nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "That's true. But perhaps because of the silence and mistakes in his past, he sought to make amends the only way he knew how, by leaving what he valued most to the person he trusted most." He opened his briefcase and pulled out another folder. "There are a few final documents you'll need to sign to officially confirm full ownership of the property, including the section still occupied by your relatives." "Still occupied?" Carla raised an eyebrow. James nodded. "According to the paperwork, the entire Greenwood estate, including the main house, the barns, the orchard, and the fishing pond, is now under your name, which means legally the rest of the family is residing on your land." Carla remained silent. Not because she wanted to wield that power, but because for the first time she realized something important. She had the ability to respond on her own terms, not as an outsider, not as the excluded one. "Is there a way to set clear boundaries?" she asked after a pause. "I don't want to evict anyone. But I also don't want to keep being treated like I don't belong in land that belonged to my mother." James smiled. "You can do whatever you like. You can put up signs, draw property lines, or even ask them to leave. But if I may speak freely, if you want to honor the spirit of your grandfather's letter, you might consider starting with kindness." Carla gave a soft laugh. "I've been kind for far too many years." James tilted his head. "This is different. Now you're kind from a place of strength. That kind of kindness carries more weight." Before leaving, James handed her a thick envelope containing a detailed map of the estate. "If you ever need legal advice for any next steps, my firm is at your service." "Thank you," Carla said, shaking his hand. Just before he got into his car, James turned back. "Oh, one more thing. Years ago, your mother asked Harold a question before she left." "What was it?" Carla asked. "Do you think I was wrong for choosing love over reputation?" James said slowly. He never answered her. But in his will, he added a handwritten note I think you should see. He turned over a copy of the will and showed her a final line written in his grandfather's hand. "Rachel wasn't wrong. It just took me too many years to admit it." Carla's throat tightened as she read the words. A belated apology, but still an apology. And for the first time she didn't feel the need to fight anymore. She had won not by shouting, but by standing firm in her truth. That afternoon, Carla wandered the property with James's map in hand. She marked each area. The old flower garden, the decaying barn, the empty plot where her mother once grew vegetables. Then she stopped in front of the main house, the site of the family reunion. She didn't need to go inside to know what it held. The matching red shirts, the laughter that had excluded her, and the glances that dismissed her. Instead, she placed a small wooden sign just outside the gate. "Greenwood Farm. New landholder Carla G. Memories welcome. Prejudice stays at the gate." That night, sitting on the cabin porch, Carla wrote a list. Not of revenge, not of names to confront, but this: what to do with this land. Restore the cabin, turn it into a community house. Start a shared vegetable garden open to all to plant and harvest. Host workshops on family reconciliation and forgotten stories. Rewrite the farm's history from her mother's perspective and the silenced voices. Forgive when strong enough not to need validation. She underlined the final line. News that Carla was now the legal owner of the Greenwood land spread like wildfire without wind. It still burned across the family like a summer blaze. Less than 3 days after James left, every face in the Greenwood lineage, Uncle Richard, Aunt Esther, even relatives Carla had never met, began showing up at the gate of the cabin. Not because they missed her. Not to apologize. But because they were afraid. The first to come was Amanda. She arrived on Thursday morning in a floral dress, carrying a basket of pastries and a thermos of pre-brewed tea. "Are you free? I'd like to talk." Carla looked at her from the porch, then nodded and invited her to sit. No one smiled in Amori, at least not the smug, dismissive smiles Carla remembered. Amanda placed the basket down and poured the tea, her hands trembling slightly. "I want to apologize," she said without meeting Carla's eyes. "At the reunion I said things I shouldn't have. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I still couldn't accept that he chose you." Carla stirred her tea slowly. "I didn't come to claim the land. I came because of the invitation." Amanda gave a weak laugh. "I honestly didn't think you'd show. You were right. I probably shouldn't have." Silence settled between them like a heavy quilt. Then Carla spoke again, calm but firm. "You don't owe me an apology because he chose me. You owe me one for laughing when people said I didn't belong here." After Amanda came Aunt Esther. She walked toward the cabin like she was entering forbidden ground. Still wearing her expensive coat, still clutching her designer handbag, but no longer carrying the pride she once wore so easily. "Carla," she began, her voice raspier than Carla remembered. "I may have been harsh with you. You once said I wasn't family," Carla replied, not bitterly, just as a reminder. Esther sighed, sitting down on the bench. "I lost my son. He died in an accident when he was 16. Since then, I haven't had the patience to love anyone who didn't seem right enough. I lost the ability to trust. And my mother wasn't right enough in your eyes? She loved the wrong man. She left the family. I couldn't forgive that." Esther paused, then added, as if confessing to herself, "But maybe it's time I did. Not because she deserves it, but because you deserve to live lighter than those of us who got it wrong." Carla said nothing. Aunt Esther was still Aunt Esther, someone who didn't know how to express love, but wasn't quite as cold as she once was. Carla didn't know if she could forgive it all. But she knew that the miracle wasn't in the apology, as it was in the changes, however small, from those who once believed they were right. That afternoon, Carla stood in front of the mirror and looked herself in the eye. Her face no longer smiled, but it no longer bowed either. She remembered her teenage years, returning home from school in silence, avoiding questions about family, something she never truly had. She remembered standing outside conversations about traditions, when all she had were a single mother, a small cake, and some last-minute gifts. And now, when she had the power to reject it all, Carla didn't. She opened the cabin door not to invite apologies, but to affirm that she was stronger than they thought. That evening, Carla received a message from someone she never expected. "Would you allow me a chance?" The sender was Uncle Franklin, Harold's younger brother, the one who hadn't invited her mother to his wedding because Carla's father didn't have a proper title. She thought long before replying. 8 a.m. Tomorrow. Cabin. Franklin arrived earlier than expected, carrying an old schematic. It was a map of the underground water system, something he had held onto for years. "I don't want to see this land ruined," he said. "Whether it's by you or anyone else." "I don't want that either," Carla replied. Franklin nodded. "You remind me of Rachel. But also of Harold, and how you don't react, you act." After he left, Carla laid out the map on the table. She thought about renovating the cabin, building a shared garden, and hosting life skills classes for local kids. No one needed her to prove she belonged anymore. Now was the time to do what was right, not for them but for herself. A few days later, Carla hosted a small gathering at the cabin. She invited everyone who had ever lived or worked on the land, from retired farmhands to Darlene, the former housekeeper, even the neighborhood kids. There were no matching shirts. No banners. Just a small wooden sign hung at the gate. "Willow Haven, a place for those once turned away." A little curly-haired girl looked up and asked, "What does willow mean, ma'am?"
Carla smiled.
"It's a kind of tree. One that bends but never breaks." That afternoon, the sky suddenly turned gray and rain began to fall, thin and cold, each drop drumming against the tin roof of the old cabin like the rhythm of a song Carla had never fully heard. She sat alone at the wooden table, holding a cup of cold tea, her eyes unfocused as she stared into the open drawer. Amidst the moldy papers and nameless trinkets lay a light brown envelope, its edges curled, sealed shut with old wax. On the front was a handwritten line in soft, slanted cursive the handwriting of her mother. If you found this, it means you came back. Carla's heart skipped a beat. She gently traced the edge of the envelope, as if touching her mother's warmth. Then slowly she opened it. My dear Carla, if you're reading this, then I'm guessing I'm no longer there to hold you the way I wish I could. I once hoped to return here with you as a daughter, as a mother, and as myself. But life doesn't always give us second chances. You may have heard many things about me. That I was rebellious. That I betrayed the family. That I shamed the Greenwood name. But you need to know one thing. I chose love and I never regretted it. The father you never met was a good man, even if he had no money or title. And even though he and I couldn't stay together, you were the most beautiful gift that love ever gave me. Your grandfather Harold was a stubborn man. But deep down he wasn't a bad one. I believe if he held on to even a sliver of his softer heart, he would leave something behind for you. Not to make amends but to say that, in the end he understood. This land was the place I dreamed of every night. It holds the pieces of my unfinished dreams and the childhood you were robbed of. If you choose to stay, live for yourself. Not for them. And if one day you find yourself feeling lost, remember, you are not alone. I never left. I simply stepped aside so you could walk the rest of the way stronger. With all my love. Mom. Carla folded the letter and pressed it to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She couldn't remember how many times she had cried, aching for just one more word from her mother. But today, though late, she finally heard that voice again. Clear, warm, and more forgiving than anything else in the world. She stepped onto the porch, letting the rain fall gently on her shoulders. The sky above was gray like memory, but in her heart bloomed a quiet light, not from being accepted, but from being understood. Inside the cabin, Carla placed her mother's letter in a simple wooden frame. She hung it just inside the front door so anyone who entered would see that this place once belonged to someone cast aside, and now embraced all hearts that had ever felt the same. That night, Carla wrote in her journal for the first time in years. July 12th. I found Mom's letter. I don't know if you can hear this, Mom, but I want you to know I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because you taught me that forgiveness doesn't need someone else's permission. I'm going to stay on this land, Mom, but I won't live in the past. I'll live for people like you, like Methos who were rejected but still chose to love. Tomorrow I'll start fixing the house. And every nail, every stroke of paint will be my thank you to you. The next morning, Carla put on overalls, a baseball cap, and began clearing out the back of the cabin. She opened every window, letting sunlight pour in like golden rivers flowing through time. She repainted the walls, placed a long table in the center of the room, planning to turn the space into a shared area for reading, painting, and gathering. A haven for anyone needing to feel they belonged. By the afternoon, Darlene arrived to help replant the vegetable garden behind the house. Together they placed little wooden markers for each crop: tomatoes, basil, pumpkins, lettuce. On the final wooden sign, Carla carved a message: Mom's garden where the past grows into hope. As the sun set, Carla sat beneath the willow tree where her mother once told her fairy tales, and watched the last light of day spread across the cabin roof. A soft breeze passed, and Carla felt it. A hand resting gently on her shoulder. Not cold, not imagined, but real, like an eternal embrace from someone who was no longer present, but had never truly left. 1 week after Carla found her mother's letter, the old cabin had transformed. The once moldy walls were now painted a soft beige. New linen curtains shimmered gently in the morning light. Harold's old bookshelf had been scrubbed clean, now lined with books Carla gathered from the storage barn, second-hand shops, and donations from neighbors who no longer needed them. But above all, it was the back garden that made Carla the proudest. Once an overgrown patch of neglect, it now bloomed with vibrant greens, vegetables thriving alongside clusters of lavender, zinnias, and a stone path winding toward a bench that faced the rising sun. She called it something simple: Willow Garden, a place where anyone could come, taste a little flavor, and leave a part of themselves behind. That evening, Carla hosted a small meal. Not a party. No wine.
No fancy decorations.
Just a dinner. She prepared herself, laid out on a long table under string lights stretched between two old willow trees. She cooked vegetable soup from her mother's recipe, baked cornbread in the wood-fired oven out back, and made an apple pie, the same dessert her mother used to make on every birthday. There were no formal invitations. Just a sign placed at the front gate. If you've ever felt unwelcome somewhere tonight, you're invited to my table. The first to arrive was Darlene. She brought a jar of homemade pickles, spicy enough to forget your sorrow, salty enough to remember the past. Then came Uncle Franklin, wearing a worn coat but with his hair neatly combed like it was a holiday. Then an elderly couple from the neighboring farm, people Carla had never spoken to before, but who read the sign and smiled. Carla added more chairs. Set more bowls. No planning. Just space for whoever showed up. And anyone who looked her in the eye with sincerity was invited to stay. Children laughed as they ran loops around the garden. Grown-ups talked, shared stories of being turned away, of journeys that ended too early, and even wounds that had never been given a name. Carla sat at the head of the table, saying little, just listening. The meal she had made was now being shared not as an act of hospitality, but as a ritual of healing. Each person with a story, but all of them seated at the same table. At the end of the meal, Darlene stood up and raised her cup of tea. She may not have been born into the place people expected, but she built a place where every heart that was once rejected can rest. Everyone lifted their cups. Carla blushed but smiled. I didn't build anything, she said quietly. I just repaired a place that used to be beautiful but was forgotten. And maybe we, the ones who've been told we don't belong, are the ones who understand best what it means to be invited in. When most of the guests had gone, Carla remained to clear the table. The soft yellow lights cast a warm glow on her face, like a blanket wrapping around memory. One card was left on the table. She picked it up. The handwriting was unfamiliar yet somehow familiar. If he were still alive, I think he would have sat here silent. But he would have helped himself to a second slice of pie, the way he always did when he got emotional. F. The letter F trembled slightly. It was Franklin. Carla left. That was exactly like her grandfather, quiet, but very specific. She went inside and placed the note in her journal, next to her mother's letter. Between pages recording the journey of the past week, she added a new line. I used to think the greatest happiness was being invited to someone else's table. But it turns out the strongest thing you can do is set your own table. And invite others to sit with you. Before bed, Carla stood by the window, gazing out into the garden. The wind swept through the willow trees, their leaves swaying like a silent wave hello. One chair remained empty. She didn't know why she hadn't put it away. But she liked to think it was there for her mother. Or her grandfather. Or anyone who had ever missed out on a seat somewhere, in this wide, wide world. The first morning after for the ones who were turned away dinner, Carla woke with a strange feeling, not worry or hesitation, but a calm she had never known before. She no longer felt like a stranger walking old ground, nor did she fear the glances from familiar faces in town. Because now, she wasn't just someone with the Greenwood name, she was the keeper of its soul. A week later, Carla went to the town clerk's office to finalize the property ownership transfer. As the clerk typed on her keyboard, she asked, "Do you want the land to remain listed as Greenwood Farm?" Carla paused for a few seconds. Then she shook her head. "I want to change the name. Willow Haven." The clerk smiled. "That sounds warm. It's where willows catch the wind, and strangers find a place to sit." A new sign was posted at the wooden gate. Willow Haven, where forgotten memories are planted again. Some relatives continued to avoid the place. Amanda moved to another city for work. Aunt Esther never returned, though she occasionally sent brief letters. "How's the garden this year? Watch out for early frost." But Carla didn't feel sad. She no longer wished for everyone to return. She only wanted no one to leave again thinking they weren't worthy of staying. The cabin became a small community hub. Each week, Carla hosted gatherings like, "Words I Never Said to My Family," "Letters to My 10-Year-Old Self," "The Day I Stopped Being Afraid." Darlene brought local women to teach baking. Kids came to play, read, and tell stories beneath the willow tree every Saturday afternoon. One evening, after a pottery class wrapped up, an elderly woman approached Carla. She quietly placed a worn necklace into Carla's hand. "My daughter once longed to sit at our family's table, But she never got the chance. I'm giving you the only thing I have left of her. Because today I finally had the meal we should have shared 10 years ago. At the end of the month, Carla held a small memorial for her mother. No flags. No long speeches. Just the old willow, a single empty chair, a photo of Rachel laughing in the sun, and a note pinned to the board. Mom didn't need to be remembered as a saint. She just wanted to be remembered as someone who dared to love, dared to live, and dared to let her child write the rest of the story. On the empty chair, Carla placed a sprig of lavender. "You always loved this scent," she whispered. The wind passed gently through the tree, its leaves swaying in agreement. The town slowly embraced Willow Haven as a vital place. Young families brought children to learn gardening. Elders visited to practice breathing, to meditate, or sometimes just to sit in stillness. Carla was invited to speak at the town's autumn festival. She stood on a small wooden stage, dressed in a white blouse, hair tied back, holding a folded piece of paper. "Years ago, I came here and was told I didn't really belong." She paused, scanning the audience. "But today, I'm not here to relive the pain. I'm here to say that all of us, at some point, have been an unacknowledged version of ourselves. Willow Haven doesn't erase the past. It just opens its doors so we don't have to heal alone." After the ceremony, a tiny brown-skinned boy tugged on Carla's sleeve. "Miss, they call me different. Am I allowed to play here?" Carla knelt down and hugged him. "You're not just allowed. You get to sit at the head of the table if you'd like." That night, Carla stood alone in the yard, watching string lights twinkle across the trees, her heart feeling light. Her mother once said, "There are dinners no one invites you to. But if you're brave enough to set your own table, you'll never eat alone again." She placed her hand over her chest where her heart no longer tightened at the word family. This story didn't end with a grand apology. No one collapsed in tears realizing they were wrong. There was no fairy tale reunion. But Carla knew. With every shared meal, every handwritten sign, every hand she held, she was rewriting the definition of belonging. No longer about blood. No longer about titles. But about choice, kindness, and the courage to stay even when you were never welcomed in.